Black Patriarch.
There is another class of colored people who make a business of keeping the troubles, the wrongs, and the hardships of the Negro race before the public. Having learned that they are able to make a living out of their troubles, they have grown into the subtle habit of advertising their wrongs, partly because they want sympathy, and partly because it pays. Some of these people do not want the Negro to lose his grievances, because they do not want to lose their jobs.
One order at a time, Vernita Johnson's print and embroidery business has grown to annual sales of $500,000 and counting.
I really didn't even realize I did it until my accountant said, "You go, girl."
Johnson started her business out of her bedroom on Chicago's West Side nearly 30 years ago. She owns this building and this equipment. Today, she employs 8 full-time workers, provides part-time work to young people in the summer. Small business in those inner-city Chicago neighborhoods provide nearly 70% of jobs. And if existing businesses added 1 or 2 jobs each, it could eliminate unemployment in the inner city. It could eliminate unemployment in the inner city. It could eliminate unemployment in the inner city. How important is it for you knowing that you're providing a livelihood for other people in your community?
Some of the guys, they actually tell me, I don't know, because in the area that I live, it's a lot of crime there, and sometimes you get in the wrong direction, you'll do the wrong thing. He said, but coming to work, it never crosses my mind.
You all, the people, these do-for-self people, y'all crazy. You cannot overcome 400 years of oppression by filing LLC paperwork. It won't happen. It won't happen. You cannot overcome that by taking a stack of papers to your attorney general's office or wherever and filing your LLC paperwork. You cannot overcome what happened to black people in this country by filing LLC paperwork. It's lazy. It's lazy.
It's lazy.
So we also want to talk a little bit about another one of Max Weber's important contributions to sociology, and that's the idea of types of authority. And so he made some observations about how authority presented itself in different types of societies. And he came up with these 3 types of authority. Now we can think of these in terms of being ideal types. We could make a list of the perfect traditional leader, the perfect charismatic leader, the perfect rational legal leader. Charismatic authority, we worship these types of leaders, and there can be good or bad charisma. Cult leaders in general have a lot of charisma. They are charismatic authorities that people want to follow and want to believe. And so for many people, they never question some of the things that these type of leaders tell them to do. They just do it because they are so enamored and so caught up with that person's charisma and personality that they never question whether or not what they're doing is right or wrong. This is a very, very dangerous type of authority because we don't take the time to rationalize whether or not what that charismatic leader told us to do is good or positive for us or for other members of society.
The Black Panthers were a far more sophisticated political organization than their white imitators would ever be, and had a far different agenda.
What they represented for the black community was something extremely positive. They represented, in a sense, a new and different form of what we traditionally call in our community talented tenth. This is the notion that the best of our community has to put its education and resources at the disposal of the community. Prior to the middle 60s, that had always been defined in terms of highly educated middle-class black people. Here, on the other hand, we have relatively uneducated young black street people who find that they have resources within themselves, which through organization can begin to transform the community. That's why they caught on so fast. They represented the organizational expression of all the people on the corners without work, outside in the schoolyards without an education.
The 10-point program. Number one, we want freedom. We want the power to control the destiny of our black communities. Number two, we want full employment for our people. Number three, we want an end to the robbery by the white man of our black communities. We want land, justice, housing, education, clothing, and peace. And as a major political objective, a United Nations supervised plebiscite to be held throughout the black colonies of America, in which only black people will participate to decide or determine the will of black people as to their national destiny.
Black people believe that if you got some Negro over-talking people, babbling, rambling on, talking loud, fished mouth, and all this gesticulating, that means that he made a point. This is where your pastors come from. But to black people, that impresses us. He talking loud, he sound confident, he must be good, he must be right. That impresses most black people.
You've never went to a Jewish community and seen no Frederick Douglass delicatessen. Why is everybody in this conducive making that we become the masters of our own destiny? We can have wool from sheep just like anyone else. But where are our clothing stores? We can get milk from cows like anyone else.
We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population.
Margaret Sanger was a racist. She's responsible for the millions of babies that have been ethnically cleansed from our country and should not be celebrated by the taxpayer-funded Smithsonian.
Want somebody who challenged corporate America to hire you and give you contracts. You got a choice. It's choice time. All this talk about qualification. What do blacks know about foreign policy? It's an insult. I was 3 years old. I came into my consciousness. My daddy was coming home from the war. Foreign policy.
He looked at a dying thief and said, this is why I came, because today, I don't care who you was yesterday. Today, I don't care what mistakes you made. Today, I don't care how low down you were. Today, you shall be with me in paradise.
Being Al Sharpton during early childhood was to grow up in a middle-class black family with much promise of trying to be somebody.
He's a freedom fighter, and I champion the reverend.
We need representation in the black community, and he's always on the front line.
But on many weekends, he's preaching.
Some of y'all want friends that ain't never had a problem.
He doesn't have his own congregation, so like Martin Luther King Jr., he told us, he preaches at a different black church almost every Sunday.
I like folk that been knocked down and shamed and disgraced, and somehow God picked them up and cleaned them off and brought them back. Say it, preacher.
the refined agitator in a candlelight march in Arizona, expanding his portfolio with Latinos, standing up against the state's immigration law.
This is about a state law that is unconstitutional.
A lot of the positions that I take now, no one would have thought I would have taken. Who would have thought 20 years ago I'd be leading marches for immigration, or that I would support same-sex marriage, which most black church people don't. So I think that a lot of people are stuck in time. Thankfully, I'm not.
Carnell West, where's our traffic, Jesse Jackson? Left to right. What a blessing to be here. What a blessing to be here today on this sunshine day. We want the world to know that we got a movement in place that says we want immigration reform now, and we gonna get it now. Oh, yeah.
Here's a clip from a 1996 American Black Journal episode featuring economist Dr. Claude Anderson.
An alternative economic structure in the simplest form would be a Japantown, a little Korea, a little Italy, a little Havana, which means where black folk would do exactly the same thing everyone else is doing. The reason we never had an economic structure in the country for black folk is for three reasons. One, we never had a national plan and a commitment to do it. Two, is that whites are boycotting black communities, and three, blacks are boycotting their own communities. And that's why you'll never see a white person get in his car, go down to a black neighborhood on a Saturday morning, get out and go into a black store and buy anything made by a black person. But neither will you see any Asians coming out of Chinatown, going into a black community buying anything. Everybody supports their own structure except black folk. That's why out of 36 million black folk, after 400 years in this country, you do not have one single solitary black business district in the entire United States. That is naivete, it is insultive, and is grossly offensive to black folk.
Here with the goddess Ayana, and I just want to ask you a question. What is the benefits of us pulling our black dollars together? How does that help us?
We create an empire when we put our dollars together. When we build into our community, we build our nation. And when we can do that, we'll be self-sufficient and we won't have to beg people that don't want to give us jobs. We don't have to beg them for jobs.
If we can come together collectively and be able to get this thing together, going collectively, we'll be able to progress in other areas as well, political, social, other areas like that.
I think it's important just to be able to recycle those dollars and get them back into our communities, because these are the individuals that hire our sons, our daughters, and our church members, for lack of a better word.
The Trump administration had petitioned me via telephone, I guess, and some emails, I guess, about 20 times, as if I would please consent to coming meeting with them in the White House and discussing immigration from my perspective, from a black perspective, because that's something that's never been brought up. I told them I appreciate the respect that they offer me, and I appreciate their being recognized the fact there is a black perspective to the immigration policies in this country. And I would love to be able to respond to them, but I cannot do it because of the political tenor in this country. I don't want to get involved in a political mixture. See, there's a difference between civil rights and political rights, and which most of our people don't understand. There's a major difference. What they're arguing about is political rights for immigrants, and has nothing to do with civil rights. My concern is civil rights for black folk. So I told them I could not attend such a meeting. But I didn't mind, simply because of my commitment to black people, to writing up a position paper, an information paper that would go through and explain it to them.
white people get to mess up all the time and they don't even come from slaves. They say, well, that's part of learning business. Is you fail and you make mistakes. I don't have the money to make mistakes. Give me the money to make mistakes and start over. Be like, well, Pastor, I tried, but I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna redo my business plan. People say we need black people to be successful. I need the opportunity to fail and not be on the street. That's what I need. Okay, and that's what black people need.
Yvette Carnell is the founder of BreakingBrown.com, and she is a respected friend and colleague of mine. I think Yvette is one of the coolest people ever.
We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism.
And frustration from dozens of Clayton County parents who say their children are going hungry tonight after their food stamps were suddenly cut off. Fox 5's Justin Gray is at the live desk with the story that is all new tonight on The Edge. Justin.
Tom, state officials admit to me tonight that something went wrong down in Clayton County at the office that administers food stamps and Medicaid, but they're still not sure what. Parents tell me tonight they can't buy food without those food stamps.
This food stamp card ain't got number 17 cents on it.
Terry Clark says she stood in line for more than 6 hours at Clayton County's Human Services office because food stamp help for her 6 children unexpectedly ended.
There's no telling my kids that we can't eat. I'm not taking no because my babies don't deserve that. Nobody kids should go hungry down here in Georgia.
State officials say this office was overwhelmed today with dozens of families facing a similar problem. The food stamps just not there.
Detroit teachers are protesting today against the rollback demands of the Detroit School Board and its financial czar, Robert Bobb. Teachers are opposing demands for concessions in health benefits as well as wages.
They're offering us nothing. They want to give us a 10% cut in our wages. They want to give us a 20% hike in our medical insurance. They want to remove all of our sick days. You know, it's like you're taking so much from us, and we're here to educate the children.
That's really what it's about, getting rid of the middle class. You're going to have the rich, and you're going to have the poor. We're going to be like a third world country, period.
It is one of the most essential elements of life. Americans enjoy some of the cleanest and most abundant water in the world. But what happens when the pipes are turned off and the tap runs dry?
How am I supposed to wash my child? How am I supposed to shower myself?
In the largest American city to ever file for bankruptcy, residents are falling behind on their water bills. Now, facing $5 billion in bad debt, the water department is taking drastic measures to plug holes, and that means cutting water. The Michigan Welfare Rights Organization says that Child Protective Services will come into the home if water is not running. These groups are now calling for help from the federal government and even the United Nations to address what they describe as a humanitarian crisis.
As the Jewish Encyclopedia, in its article on socialism, again tells us, the passion of many Jews to socialize the world was not confined to Russia. As peddlers of socialism, it tells us, Jews must be reckoned among the pioneers of the socialist parties in America.
The Comintern directed the American Party to champion the cause of African Americans.
And the Comintern make a declaration in 1928 that we must respond to the Negro question first in the United States. We must respond to the Negro question first in the United States.
Инструментальщик Роберт Робинсон избран депутатом Московского совета.
African Americans who came to work in Russian factories were warmly welcomed.
One of the core principles was that Marxism is going to eliminate racism because racism is a byproduct of capitalism. One of the core principles was that Marxism is going to eliminate racism because racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Because racism is a byproduct of capitalism, and allowing those people to be demonized and to be called a different race, to be called other people.
We have to discuss Dr. Claude Anderson. And before we do that, I just want to say, if you want to support the show, what's going on, family? We just got to talk about it. Somebody said, oh, not Dr. Claude. We just got to talk about it. We got to be honest about it. Like, we family, right? We can't have an honest conversation as family. Think about it. If I told you that, if I came to your house right now or your job right now and I said, hey, the unemployment rate, the jobless rate for young black men is 40% in a lot of cities, what would you say to me? What would your answer be to me? When you look at, and we can name off these cities, we're talking about Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC. What I'm telling you, black people, is that is a sign. That is a sign of systemic failure. That is not a sign of individual failure. When a group of people fails in mass in those numbers, that's not an individual failure. That's a systemic failure because that group of people was targeted.
There is a direct relationship in this country between how many businesses you own and how poor you're going to be as a group. Those groups that have no businesses are going to be poor and imprisoned. And nobody was concerned and understand that if you don't have any businesses, you're going to be poor. The reason black people are the poorest people in the United States is because we don't own businesses. If you don't have any businesses, you're going out of existence.
One of the questions that we should all ask each other is this: how did we get here? And how do we continue to be taken advantage of? The answer that I get to that a lot is, well, we get taken advantage of because, you know, we don't do for self and we don't do our own business and stuff like that. Well, I've shown you data to show that there's only a small amount of money. We own nearly no resources, and we're 13% of the population. So that's not the solution. And that's not how we get taken advantage of, by not doing that.
And I go to Detroit, Michigan again as an example. Detroit, Michigan is a 90% black city. They got 146 gas stations in Detroit, Michigan. 146 gas stations in Detroit, Michigan. Arabs own 141 in a black city. In the black city of Detroit, Michigan. Arabs own not only the gas stations, they own the grocery stores, party stores, liquor stores. The Koreans in Detroit, they own the barbecue restaurants, the nail shops, the wig shops, the hair products, distributorships. The East Indians in Detroit, they own the rest of the businesses. They own the Dunkin' Donuts, the cheap motels, the check cashing services. Blacks own nothing in a city where they're the majority population. I got 1 million black folk in Detroit that owns nothing. Now, what's the impact of that? That's why in the 2000 census, the United States government declared Detroit to be the poorest city in the United States with the highest crime rate. And everybody's sitting back in the black leadership saying, oh, why are we so poor? You're poor because you're stuck on stupid. It is not the government's responsibility to help you do anything. The government's responsibility and the police department's responsibility is to put you in jail and keep you out of the way.
When you talk about capitalism, when you talk about black capitalism, what a lot of people say is that, listen, if black people stop doing what they're doing, buying all these weaves and Jordans and all this stuff, then we will be okay. The problem isn't capitalism. The problem isn't black people. Isn't white people. The problem isn't racism. The problem isn't white supremacy. It's you. You buy too many Jordans.
Yeah, we don't know how to spend right.
We don't know how to spend right.
But as their own data suggests, it's not based on what they can point to as actual money that any black person or community has. It's based on either survey data or really some wild stuff that the Selig Center gets into.
I wanted to have a conversation about what undergirds this sort of black capitalism. And there is no, and not just black capitalism. I'm talking about this do for self movement, right? Talking about do for self and what they tell you about, what has to happen in order for black people to move forward. So what I'm doing is trying to bring Jerry Ball on, a professor, to show you that what you've been told about what's necessary for black people to have success in America is just a lie.
Please welcome the Vice President of Global Philanthropy for J.P. Morgan Chase & Company, September Hargrove.
Good afternoon. Over the next couple of slides, I'm going to really focus in on two types of data that we've captured. One being the local consumer commerce index, which really looks at the card transactions of our customers across the country. We focused in on 14 cities where we've been able to really drill down into what are our customers purchasing, what are the demographics of those customers, where are they buying it at. So in total, we've been able to analyze over the last 49 months about 60 million kind of transactions that have happened here. 24 billion card transactions that have happened. And again, we're able to dissect that information across age, income, business size in terms of, are they purchasing at small businesses? Are they at medium-sized businesses? What are the products that they're purchasing? And where is this transaction happening in respect to where they live?
I was just blown away by the credit card transaction data, for example.
African American women spend billions every year on black hair products. Even though they only make up 10% of the American population, they buy 70% of all wigs and extensions purchased here in the United States. But with that huge market, who controls it? Where does the money end up? Where do the billions go? I decided to try to find out here at the Black Hair Extravaganza. Follow the money.
Apply the thermal straightening ball. Section the hair into...
We think the African American style is very big business. Very big business. Very big business.
Everybody wants to be a part of our market because we're the #1 consumer. We spend 10 to 1 on anybody in hair.
Why don't black people own anything? Man, I done been all up and through the hood trying to figure this shit out. I done talked to some of my brothers and sisters. I even talked to some of our historically known oppressors. But you know they wasn't trying to put a nigga up on game. They acted like they forgot how to speak English. Some of them even got mad. And some of them just, ran back into their stores and locked the door.
It is the malallocation of the money that we have, not the lack of money. But my idea was if the Asians could pay their rent in Harlem and make a living, using only whose money? Black folks' money. Black folks' money. They're not even using Asian money up there. The Koreans are not even coming up there to do their shopping. And the others, they shopping somewhere in Koreatown, maybe somewhere else. Okay? The Hispanics, it's our money supporting their families, paying that rent. And believe me, rent on 125th Street can go as high as $5,000 or more a month. Favorite Shoes pays $10,000 a month right on that corner. But they have employees there, ladies and gentlemen. They're making money there. That implies what? That there is money over there. And if you can support this kind of rent with our kind of money, then we can support our own people with this kind of money. We can employ our own children with this kind of money.
Kwame Ture used to just simply, I know he was kind of joking for organizational purposes, but one of the jokes he used to tell was, we should run for local office and assume political power so that we could raise the tax base of the people paying home ownership taxes. And since we don't own homes, we'll just be living off of them. And then he would just say, if you want to end poverty, give poor people money. It's just that simple. If you want to end poverty, give poor people money. It's just that simple. Give poor people money. It's just that simple.
This administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
President Johnson signed a $947.5 million anti-poverty bill into law in 1964.
See, we have systems to help our poor. So we have systems to help the poor. Section 8, food stamps, all types of subsidies.
The U.S. federal government spends well over $600 billion a year on welfare, spread across more than 120 different programs. When you add in spending at the state and local level, total welfare spending in the United States amounts to over $1 trillion a year. That's over $20,000 for each and every poor person in the United States. Sounds great, right? But unfortunately, not only has this massive spending not solved the problem of poverty, it's sometimes made it worse.
There are about 35 countries where capitalism is now well developed. It probably works best in Germany, but in the remaining 161 nations, billions of dollars in aid are transferred every year from the rich to the poor parts of the world. These materialist interventions will never work, because the problem isn't really a material one to begin with. Instead, certain countries fail to succeed at capitalism because it's a nation's attitudes, hopes, and a sense of what life is about that produces an economy that either flourishes or flounders.
Many of us believe that aid to Africa is crucial to lift people out of poverty, but not Dambisa Moyo. In a controversial new book, she argues that foreign aid has been a disaster for Africa and must stop.
You tell a very, very interesting kind of micro story to illustrate how aid can be a job killer rather than be unintended consequences. This is the story of the mosquito net maker in Africa.
Yes.
Relate that to our viewers.
Sure. So it's very simple. I've been in a number of international conferences where usually a vociferous Hollywood star stands up and screams, oh, we've got to give mosquito nets to Africans.
For malaria, of course.
For malaria, yes, which of course is a very serious problem across the continent. And people, you know, will dump mosquito nets that are made internationally into the African continent. But nobody ever stops to think that there are mosquito net producers on the African continent already, and very often by dumping free mosquito nets, you're putting them out of business. And more fundamentally, the question then becomes, why not use the money that you're using to buy the mosquito nets internationally? Why not invest that money so you can encourage the production of mosquito nets in Africa, and thereby creating jobs?
Yeah, you make the additional point that once the mosquito net manufacturer goes bankrupt, there's no one around to fix the nets when they get holes in them, as they invariably do.
The
IVM brand remains a pride of the continent, hence should be supported by Africans. Guests at the unveiling lauded the efforts of Africa's pioneer vehicle manufacturing company, IVM, in giving Nigeria its own automobile brand and called on Nigerians to buy the brand in order to grow the economy.
It is very crucial to support a Nigerian brand of vehicle instead of patronizing that one abroad. And that's what I have demonstrated here by picking one. And people will see us drive it in Nigeria here, and then they will believe.
In the ministry, we use it. All over the place, government is patronizing it. Anambra State government has patronized it. It is the best.
They were designed, their concept, is based on Nigerian terrain and environment. So it's a very wonderful achievement. What I'm telling Nigerians, not to only patronize Nigerian cars, is to patronize mainly made in Nigerian items, that it will lead them and it will grow the economy, and it will make the economy to grow very fast. What I'm telling Nigerians, not to only patronize Nigerian cars, is to patronize mainly made in Nigerian items, that it will lead them and it will grow the economy, and it will make the economy to grow very fast.
Listen, people don't come from individual effort. People don't come from nothing. Anybody who tells you that I came from nothing is usually lying. And when somebody comes to you and starts saying, I'm a self-made millionaire, go back through their life and find that hidden advantage and opportunity that they're not telling you about.
1 in a Million. The history of Madam C.J. Walker and her entrepreneurial legacy. Not even her poor and difficult beginnings stymied Madam Walker's road to greatness. The woman who would become known as the first self-made female millionaire and the greatest benefactress of her race was born the daughter of Owen and Minerva Breedlove, poor ex-slaves living on a cotton farm in Louisiana.
Madam C.J. Walker was born Sarah Breedlove in 1867 on a plantation in Delta, Louisiana, where her parents had been slaves before the Civil War. And her early life was really bleak. By the time she was 7 years old, both parents had died. She developed a hair care product line, and then she trained thousands of other women who began to buy and sell her products. And by the time she moved to Harlem in 1916, she was one of the wealthiest and most successful African-American entrepreneurs in the country.
Black Wall Street is a name given to Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as a historical city where blacks thrived. It was a prosperous city with over 600 successful businesses.
You had a community of over 10,000 people. You had many black doctors. You had many black lawyers, black professionals, black millionaires. You even had brothers owning planes.
This is Goreen Beauty College, founded by Mrs. Gold S. Morgan Young. These are the more than 30 employees of the Union Protective Assurance Company, led by President H.D. Whalen, the owners of Stories Watch and Jewelry Repair, the founders of the Tri-State Bank. All are successful black-owned businesses in Memphis, Tennessee. And all were filmed by the Reverend L.O. Taylor of the Olivet Baptist Church. killer shot the footage you're seeing now as a record of Black Memphis, a place white Memphis never even saw. It's the same in other southern cities too. Atlanta, Richmond, and Birmingham. Separation of the races have created thriving, but separate, cities within cities.
Durham's Black Commercial District was home to an area internationally known as the Negro Wall Street, a collection of banks and insurance companies that represented, quote, one of the most dramatic examples of concentrated African-American financial might this country has ever produced, unquote. These financial institutions were so sound that they helped virtually every black business in Durham survive the Depression.
The wealth disparity actually just it just is not the same as the income disparity. It's so much bigger. It's huge because it's generational. It's what they call in vitro transfers. You know what an in vitro transfer is? That's when they transfer money throughout life, and that money just keeps getting passed down and down and down through generation. So what you're looking at is we're a group that does not have any money for in vitro transfers. We don't have the money for that.
As for the last conspiracy theory, elite families passing their wealth from generation to generation, evidence suggests that it is the exception rather than the rule. Certainly, one can point to the DuPonts or the Kennedys or the Rockefellers having successfully accomplished this. But, a number of surveys of wealthy families have consistently found that only about 5% of wealthy families' assets were inherited. The vast majority, approximately 70%, was created in the current generation via business ownership. The remaining 25% of wealth was the result of high-income occupations, such as doctors, attorneys.
in this country, in America, the group with the highest income in America today are Asians. 1 out of every 10 Asians are in business. Black folk at the bottom with 1 out of 104. If you don't have any businesses, you're going out of existence. Why is that now? It's because all you're doing is working for a living. We're the only people that encourage our children to go off and get a good education and go get a good job. No other group of people tell their children that. No other group is that silly to tell their children, go off and get a good education and then go get yourself a good job working in a white company someplace.
Even if you invest in stocks and you make money, what you're really doing for the most part is making white people rich. You're making white companies rich. How do you have black business? How do you have black empowerment by making white companies rich? Doesn't that strike you as odd? The idea that you would get rich by making white companies rich? Do you really think that you can get ahead in life by making white companies have more money? Don't you see that arrangement doesn't benefit you?
All right, you guys, I'm Phil Town for Rule 1 Investing. I want to talk to you for a second about one thing on the balance sheet called assets. What an asset is something that has value in the market, not that yours doesn't, but let's say it does, that we just focus on the things that we can sell for some kind of money. Whatever you've got out there that is a valuable thing would be considered an asset.
Chris Rock has joked about black people and their money.
Wealth is passed down from generation to generation.
There's a sad truth in his humor. Studies show black people tend to chronically make less, save less, and pass less money on to the next generation than their white counterparts. And if you don't have assets, you can't pass them on.
Give us, Lord, our daily bread. Amen.
Marvin and Kathy Dickerson are making sure their family doesn't follow the same pattern.
1 or 2 bad moves and it's going to follow you.
Married for 9 years, the couple started planning their finances well before welcoming 6-year-old Kaylin and 3-year-old Miles.
How's this a fair fight?
We knew we had to invest because we knew one day we were going to have kids, and we wanted our kids to have more than what we had.
The Dickersons developed a budget, paid off their debt, began investing, and set up a will, a trust, and 529 plans to pay for their kids' college educations.
We can pass that wealth or those assets on to our kids with a $1.5 million tax exemption.
But this family is the exception. According to the Brookings Institution, the median net worth of black Americans is about $28,000. Compare that to $140,000 for the median household nationwide.
What were your parents saying to you to make sure that it was so important, that you knew it? You work, you save.
While Marvin is a spender, Kathy is a saver, so the couple makes all big financial decisions together.
Kathy had this guiding principle: if she spent $100, she got a headache. As we got married and had more resources, you can add another zero. It was like a few $1,000s.
Valerie Coleman Morris, who focuses on financial literacy for women, young people, and people of color, points to a couple of reasons black Americans are so behind in creating wealth and passing it on.
Money is still a very much off-limits topic
in the average family, but in African American families, it's almost taboo. The second thing is the 401k. We are not participating, and when we do participate, we are contributing far less than most other people. But in addition to that, there is this overwhelming need for becoming more financially literate, and we aren't.
You know, it's about ownership of assets. And that's really the issue. That's an area where I think that whether we're talking media, whether we're talking sports, whether we're talking almost any music, almost anything that we as African Americans are involved in, we fall very short when it comes to an understanding ownership of assets. And that's where real wealth is created. And that's where real power is created.
Criticism I keep getting from people is that, Yvette, you're telling us to sit around and wait for white people. That's what you're doing. And what you're telling me is that you don't understand government. I'm not telling you to sit around and wait for white people. I'm telling you to get involved with your government and get some courage in your heart and do what our ancestors did and fight for your place. Like, we don't have, black people don't have money. We don't have wealth. When you don't have money and you don't have wealth, that's what you do. You say you figure it out. If you promise, if somebody promises you, if somebody comes to your house tomorrow and you don't have anything to eat and they say, I'm going to buy you groceries, you don't say, well, where you going to get the money from? Where you work at? You just say, go get me groceries. I'm hungry. That's all you say. This is insane. I need money. I need about $5,000 in donations from you all. That's what I need. Because I don't want to do just another show where it's just, you know, another show where it's just me and on Blog Talk Radio or something. And it's me with a phone camera. Or it's me, I want to bring you a product. I want to be able to live cast over multiple platforms. I want to be able to live cast over Facebook, live cast over YouTube, and still have a call-in show. So that's what I want to do. And that costs money. And that costs money that I don't have. So what I'm asking for you to do is like go to my site, breakandbrown.com, and there's a link. There's a PayPal link over on the side, on the right-hand side. If you click on that link, you can subscribe to breakandbrown.com and donate $3 a month, $15 a month, $25 a month, or you can make a one-time donation towards the show.
I really didn't think about owning a company or starting a business, but I did want to be successful. I wanted to be a great example for my children. One of the things that I've always been about as far as the person that I am is giving back, even though there were times when I didn't have a lot to give back, so I gave time. Working previously at General Motors, going to school part-time to try to get my education, I think that all those things influenced who I am today. You know, I had some struggles. I lived in the projects. I was on welfare. So once I did establish my company, one of the first things that we did was to join the DC Adopt a School program. We immediately went to those schools and asked, what is it that you need? And whatever they asked for, we took care of. I have seen more opportunity for young people As a whole, Washington, D.C. has definitely improved, and I love living here. My team has played a vital role in the success of my company. One thing we all have in common is our give back demeanor. We've instituted a policy in the company that anyone who supports a charity, JMA would donate to that charity on behalf of that employee to show that, we encourage our employees to be involved in charities and community support.
Tell you about what good black politics looks like. What good black politics looks like. It looks like this man who just passed away recently, Chokwe Lumumba. That's what it looks like. Do you know what he did? Do you know what he did? He became mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. Ain't no place in America more racist than that. And he started redistributing wealth in terms of contracts from all these white people who were getting all the wealth to some black contractors, black co-ops, all of that stuff. That's what Chokwe Lumumba did. He was a revolutionary leader. That's who he was. And now that he's passed away, his son is taking over as the leader of that state. That city, Jackson, Mississippi.
This right here is the house that I grew up in, 5260 Maddox. When most people bring you back to the hood, they try to front like it's the worst place in the world. But like when we first moved over here, it was an all-white neighborhood. This was a beautiful, beautiful community, but just like white flight, you know what I'm saying? When the white people leave, then the city stopped taking care of the community. So it's like, literally, this used to be an upper middle class house. This used to be a really, really nice neighborhood. So by the time I was in high school, junior high school, Jackson, Mississippi was the murder capital of the United States.
We are in DeSoto, Texas. The population here is 30,000, and demographically it is 70% black. 50% of the businesses in this community are black owned, and the median household income in this community is $65,000, which is higher than Dallas, which is $54,000. A lot of these homes look very expensive, I'm seeing nice cars. This community kind of destroys the myth that all black people live in poverty. The household income here is actually higher than the white household income in the city of Dallas. I don't know how much these homes go for, but they look very expensive. Like I said, this community is a good blueprint for upper middle class black communities. It's setting the example for upper middle class black communities in America. This is a great example. There are several communities like this in America. There are several in Maryland and Los Angeles. But the poverty rate here is below 5%, and the crime rate is very low. The homes are, the lawns in the homes are clean, and the community is well kept.
Good. Like a lot of North Texas families, afternoons get active inside the Clayton household. Taj Clayton is a Dallas attorney.
They're all hung up around the chimney with the hoops.
His wife Tanika, vice president at an education technology company. They had their pick of places to raise 3 children.
DeSoto, for us, and from our perspective, was the best place to live. It was just a hidden gem that a lot of people didn't know about.
South of Dallas and west of I-35, 51,000 live among the large homes and rolling hills of DeSoto.
We are actually 3 minutes from our kids' school. We got some of our friends to move here from Plano.
There are beautiful hills, undulating landscapes, incredible parks. I feel fortunate to live on a golf course.
And there's something else.
It's a really nice bedroom community where you see a lot of successful people who live here. And demographically, there are a lot of African Americans.
That's something very familiar to DeSoto Mayor Carl Sherman.
Since 2000 to 2010, there has been a large migration of African Americans to North Texas, and many of those have chosen to live in the city of DeSoto.
The U.S. Census says 68% of people in DeSoto are black, compared with 25% in Dallas and 19% in Fort Worth. The median household income is $60,000, higher than the state average and the city of Dallas.
Citizens literally get out of the car and they take pride in their community. They pick up the trash along with our employees.
Despite the positives, the mayor says some real estate agents steer potential white residents away from DeSoto.
They were shown some of our nice, pristine communities, well-manicured yards, and the realtor would say, "Are you sure you want to live here?"
We have a beautiful community, and there is so much opportunity here.
African Americans also run 55% of businesses in DeSoto. African Americans also run 55% of businesses in DeSoto.
Government. Nothing is as big as government that can come down and dictate to people, no, you can't do this to black people. We saw what happened when we were left alone without government. The government abandoned us. And the Ku Klux Klan came in and stole our stuff, set our houses on fire, burned crosses in our yard because the government was like, not our problem. That's what happens when you don't have a government that works.
If you tell me, well, the white man ain't gonna never do nothing for us, listen. Your government is not the white man. That's the government that we all, nobody except for stupid people walk around saying that our government is the white man. Not Asians, not Hispanics, not white people, not Latino. Like nobody else does that except for us. That's the white man. No, that's your government. We all got the same government. And the government is the Congressional Black Caucus, it's the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, it's white people, it's Asian lawmakers, it's everybody in the government. So stop saying stupid stuff because you don't know enough to say anything different. It's not the white man, it's you holding your government accountable for a debt. Because like I said before, government, our government, whether you like it or not, it's your government, it's my government, and the government is never neutral.
You got to go get the book. What it points out very clearly is that there were these mixed communities that had mixed up black and white, whether it was European, immigrant, or whatever, and were living peacefully until the government came in and intervened. Understand what I'm saying? Your government, my government,
came in and resegregated America through the New Deal, through the Federal Housing Authority, through the local Chicago Housing Authority, from everywhere from Baltimore, Chicago, Atlanta, Montana, Ferguson, segregated and resegregated and made it to where white and black people could never touch. Now understand one thing, and this is going to upset some people, but it is what it is. Separate but equal was never equal. Ain't never going to be equal. So as long as they can keep us over here, away from white people, they're going to be able to keep us away from the services that we need. And that's what we saw happen. Now understand that it happened on a lot of fronts. Happened on public housing, happened in zoning, happened on home ownership. Whatever black people got credit or got the stuff that they thought they was going to need to move to the next level, white people changed the game. The government changed the game. Normally, for those of you who don't know how food stamps work, oh, I don't know, Yvette, what are you talking about? You normally get a card. Now, they give you a card in most places, and you can go and you can use that in a lot of places, everywhere from the grocery store to a lot of fast food place. You can use your card. Okay, so what they're saying is that a large chunk of that, a large chunk of what you would normally use, for your using Kroger or Publix, or if you're out somewhere else, Ralph's or wherever, or a lot of these, we're gonna give you a box. You hear all of these do-for-selfers say, we don't need no government, we just gotta do for self. Understand that this black business owner could go out of business. And if you sell foodstuffs, or whether you own a restaurant and you accept EBT, or whether you own a store and you sell everything from Doritos to green beans or whatever. If you accept EBT, this is going to snatch a lot of that EBT away from you, because they're giving part of that. Trump wants to give 50 or 60%. They're giving that to the boxes. You don't know business. Let's do government, because you don't know business. We know you don't know business. Let's do government.
The Democrats have hired, and at sub-minimum wage, I might add, Black America to vote for them in exchange for crappy housing, crappy food, crappy EBT cards, and crappy Obama phones. And if you're a Black American who's wondering why things just get worse and worse for Black America, well, your answer is that when it comes to your Democratic benefactors, you're not a customer. You're an employee. You're a minimum wage employee.
So when I look at that, I ask myself, how did we get here? How did we get to a point where everything is based on hard work, and we're working harder, and we're not seeing the gains? What kind of black politics got us here? That's the question I'm asking myself. So when I ask myself that question, one thing that keeps occurring to me as I ask myself that question is I keep referring back to the legacy of Booker T. Washington. And Booker, who is heralded as this do-for-self icon, is in his own words saying that, I attribute so much of who I am and what I have to white people. If you broke into a slave owner's house, that the slave who lived in their house would be the first one to kill you, because he would lay down his life for the white family. Now, if I were to say something like this, you would call me a coon. You would call me a name.
Booker T. Washington had also formed his organization, and he was a teacher, educator. Mm-hmm. He built schools. He used his students, taught them skills, mm-hmm. and he used them to build several buildings, 3 or 4 big sized buildings, and there he housed his school. He said you should get into industry. You should take courses like engineering and then go into business and get into industry.
The early philosophy of the Nation of Islam is that black Americans should do for self. And what were some of the early economic plans to get the people in the Nation of Islam involved in trying to generate some income on their own and recirculate it in their own communities?
I must acknowledge that even that wasn't original for us, because Booker T. Washington also said, do for self, lift yourself. He said, pick up your buckets where you are. And if you have a skill, he said, if you can do the white mistress lady's hair, he said, then why don't you open a business and do hair for yourself, make money for yourself. So actually Booker T. Washington had that, a little head of the Nation of Islam.
The self-reliance concept of Booker T. Washington. Stop calling him an Uncle Tom and stop calling him conservative. He was a strategist whose strategy didn't always work. But if he scratched his head when nothing itched, and if he said yes when he didn't mean yes, he did some quiet Tomming so that another generation can live to say hell no. And you missed the point. When you grew strong enough to stand before your enemies and say hell no, you wanted to integrate into your enemy. You betrayed Booker Washington. You didn't read his Atlanta Cotton Expedition speech. That was not a compromise, that was a con game. When Booker T. Washington stood before all those people at a critical time in our history at the end of the 19th century, he tried to be all things to all people. He had a little for the northerner, little for the southerner, little for the blacks. And each time he made one of those high points, he got some more money and kept some more black schools open. So you can build shoes, have repair shops, print shops, entrepreneurship in the black community. Now you got Koreans, everybody running stores in your community except you. Who told you your brain can't conceive and run a store?
The history of African American repression in this country rose from government-sanctioned racism. It's important to remember that, from government-sanctioned racism. Jim Crow laws were a product of bigoted state and local governments. Big and oppressive government has long been the enemy of freedom, something black Americans know all too well and on a personal level.
But one of the things I've said about Clarence is that he's right and wrong. But where he's wrong, he's really, really wrong. In terms of so much of his information is dated. In the sense of, like, Claude Anderson wrote his last book, I think it may be in 2000 or 2001. Like, and a lot of people, and then he wrote a bunch of other ones, before, like 2 or 3 before that, right? And people are bringing that to me like, what about this? And I'm just like, this isn't even what you should be reading right now.
We're not a racist organization because we understand that racism is an excuse used for capitalism. And we know that racism is just it's a byproduct of capitalism. That's the people's thing. Socialism is the people. You're afraid of yourself. If you You're afraid of socialism, you're afraid of yourself.
And it's not about to get real. Yvette about to take somebody down. Yvette about to, she's just so negative. No, I'm not about to do anything like that. I'm about to have a conversation. But back to Dr. Claude Anderson, I digress. There are a few things that I want to get to, because he always talks about us coming into their community, and we can't come into their community and get our due. And let me tell you something. I'm just going to be honest about it. I'm an American. There is no their community. This whole country is my community, or at least it should be. Like, you cannot relegate me to a particular space. That's not how this works. Like, there's a mom and pop black store and there's a mom and pop white store, and we're just shopping at the white store because we just think the white water's best. That's not what's happening. What's happening is these are multinational conglomerates. These are monopolies. And if you really wanted to do black business, you would have been fighting against monopolies, because monopolies hold off people from entering the market. So when Dr. Claude Anderson says, well, Asians actually do apprenticeships and they come here and they only deal with their communities, if you go into a lot of these Asian restaurants, they got Mexicans working in there. So that's not true. If you go into a lot of these Asian restaurants, they got Mexicans working in there. So that's not true. Like, the thing that bothers me is we don't ever cross-reference these people. When you see them say stuff, go check it out. Don't just take what they say is true and be like, you right, we ain't never did that. No, the only reason you say we ain't never did that because you haven't read enough either.
Let me go to another point with those Asians, because the question you're raising. Asians, on the other hand, you find their unemployment rate is almost zero, Dr. Watkins. Zero. Because they hire their own people. They build those own businesses they built. And when they build those businesses, they hire their own people. They don't worry around talking about trying to be politically correct and hire everybody in their business. They'll put out statements saying, no, we will not, under any circumstances, prioritize hiring somebody else over our own people. We might occasionally make a mistake and hire a white person here and there, but in most instances, we're not going to hire whites. We'll hire only our own people. So you go into an Asian restaurant, you ain't gonna see no blacks working as cooks or waiters in an Asian restaurant, or any Asian business. They hire their own people.
When I started the seafood industry, I built waterland fisheries to be the first and only vertically integrated seafood industry in the United States. We became the biggest producer of seafood. And I built that as a foundation for you all. Because my empowerment principles, I tried to teach you all. Always learn to go vertical. Go on everything from the bottom to the top. Borrowing a little $500,000 from a so-called black bank. A black bank. And at that point in time, while waiting trying to get a black to come over and buy the insurance company, the black bank decided they were foreclosed on taking over. And one black Western put over $1 million. I'll give you $1 million right now to take it from you. And they said, no, we don't want anything. We just want to foreclose on it. And so they foreclosed on the facility. And this is the black bank, so-called, that when we found out what the black bank is. They were right there. Are you going to tell them the name of the bank? Yeah, I'll tell you what it is. It's called Harbor Bank.
Oh my God, that's where I've been.
They have to come to find out. The Harbor Bank is not a black bank. No, the 51% was owned by Greek in Baltimore. And the white in the Harbor Bank was a black bank.
Pack of records.
And so I'm telling you, start building these businesses, I'm telling you, like, be careful. Be careful, like, where all the crooks hang out. You see. And also, a lot of these banks you call, even a black bank, they're front banks. They call themselves minority banks, so they get past it.
When I looked at it, I said, I saw that his attorney's name was, his lead attorney was Stephen M. Schneebaum. Stephen M. Schneebaum is your attorney. And I said to myself, Stephen M. Schneebaum doesn't sound like a black name. Now, I understand we all got different names, and maybe he is, but I'm going to look him up and see if he is. And this is what I find. Mr. Schneebaum, the attorney, that's Stephen M. Schneebaum. Now, unless you're telling me there's another Negro there with this same name in that same area, CLAUD, your attorney was a white man. Now, y'all talking all this stuff about doing business with black people, and we're going to do stuff with black people. We're going to be here with black people. But you chose a white man for your attorney.
Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for joining us here today. It's 5 April 2016, and we're here in Thayer Hall. If you could, please, sir, introduce yourself and spell your first and last name for us.
My name is Percy Squire. My first name is spelled P-E-R-C-Y. My last name is spelled S-Q-U-I-R-E.
Okay, sir, and you graduated class of 1972 from West Point, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
I'm just trying to tell you, I never told you that you can't do any kind of black business. I just said that black business without black politics can't work. Harbor Bank is the name of the bank. Again, black business without black politics can never work.
Black folk must quit allowing people to tell them to go out and vote. Vote for what? Nobody's going to do anything for black folk in politics. Politics is controlled by money, major corporations who got the money. That's what controls politics. If you have no money, you have no say-so, you have no benefits coming. So you take your money and you control, and you take your money from the first floor, you buy every politician on the second floor. And any politician you can't buy, you rent or lease them to get what you need.
We've been doing black capitalism. We've been doing black entrepreneurship just as long as we've been doing everything else. And you know what's happened? White mobs, white barriers to entry, people burning down our businesses and we can't get them built back up. This is what's happened. But if you don't know our history in this country, it's very easy for you to get fooled. You've been doing black capitalism, and what's happened is the white people just come in and burn down your store. And they can still do that. I read this book a while ago. A black communist in the freedom struggle, and please don't tell me, well, I'm not communist, I can't read that. I read stuff the capitalists write all the time. I read stuff from every avenue, because you can't limit yourself that way. You just can't. Not and be a grown person and consider yourself an intellectual person. But he has a very good story in here about blacks fighting back. And I'm going to start at the top. Please just bear with me for a moment. but we're the only group that the government has decided you will be the underclass. We will weaponize and we will sustain an assault against Native black people from the time they got here to now. No other group has dealt with that but us.
You have to demand more of government, and you have to force white people to come off all of the Scrooge McDuck wealth that they're swimming in. You have to demand more of government, and you have to force white people to come off all of the Scrooge McDuck wealth that they're swimming in.
I've talked about Dr. Sandy Darity on this show. I don't think anybody's solutions are perfect, but I think his solutions in terms of them being anchored in government and anchored in our history of descendants of slaves, I think they're good. And I think because they're anchored in actual reality and scholarship, he's more likely to get attention and get, if you go into a sit down with these people, you have to have data. You can't be like, well, I believe we can do it. That's not what works. So I've talked about that. I've talked about Derek Hamilton on this show in terms of he and Sandy Darity working together in solutions. I agree with a lot of what they do. I think we need more. I think we need to even go even further than where they go. But I agree with where they are. So yeah, there are people.
So we thought it was a perfect moment to speak to possibly the most famous of all advocates for democratic socialism, Carnell West. He's a professor at Harvard. He's an honorary co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America, and he joins us tonight. Carnell, thank you for coming on.
No, thank you, and it's good to be in dialogue with you once again, brother.
It's really important for us to begin. We are so afraid of the word socialism that we refuse to do economic planning. And every other industrialized country does economic planning.
Do you still see on the horizon the end of capitalism or the end of the idea of private property or the private rights over the rights of the many? Is that still one of your charges, is still one of your issues of concern? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
At the 21st Century Neighborhoods 2017 Symposium, the project's lead investigators, Dr. Derek Hamilton and Dr. Sandy Darity, discussed their current work on wealth disparities in Baltimore.
With Baltimore was really relevant because of some of the media attention that was going on around criminalization and incarceration. So we wanted to look at another dimension, like what is the role of incarceration as it relates to incarceration and the intersection with race as it relates to asset building.
Professors Darity and Hamilton also discussed potential redistributive measures. One was a federal job guarantee program. Another was what's known as a baby bond system.
But the idea is that every child would receive a trust fund. The amount of the trust fund would vary based upon the wealth position of the child's family. And so the wealthiest families, we'd give the newborn child a $50 trust fund, but for families at the lowest end of the wealth distribution, we'd give the kid $50,000 to $60,000.
And the professors have some ideas for how to fund such a program.
The estate tax is a potential option, but we can also think about the ways in which capital gains is taxed at the local level, the ways in which mortgage interest is taxed at the local level, and how those benefits and taxes are distributed.
But for right now, Dr. Darity thinks a more likely way to fund baby bonds would be to call on philanthropists.
The community would seize the opportunity to try to show how this type of project could be done, so we could learn about what needs to be altered or what needs to be changed before we tried to scale it up at the federal level when we have a more politically receptive Congress.
And for those people that aren't familiar, meet myself and Sandy Darity again. Did this report, came out 2 weeks ago now, but we're going to keep moving on here And what we're going to talk about for a second here is buying and banking black, you know, and the whole idea that and black entrepreneurship can save us. We've seen that from Claude Anderson with Powernomics, and I talked about that last week. It doesn't fit into the reality of the data, though. None of the idea that we're just going to open factories and then buy politicians and then buy media fits the reality of a billionaire America when you look at the numbers.
Consumption of resources that are used for consumption purposes are not necessarily things that are going to build wealth. There still is an enormous wealth gap, which is attributable to two sorts of things. First, the capacity of whites to transfer or transmit high levels of wealth or higher levels of wealth across generations, and also the capacity that whites have had to benefit from government-sponsored asset-building opportunities. But there's a section of our report where we talk about the magnitude of black businesses, both in terms of the specific banking sector, but also in general. And I think one of the big points we make, which is related to your observation, is that if anything, the most we can say about black business is that black business is very small. And that's associated with the lack of political power and the lack of substantial wealth.
Because you asking me for a solution to make you American when you need to ask your government. You need to ask your government for baby bonds. I have Professor Darity talk about that. Federal jobs guarantees.
I was saying backstage, let's talk about the fact that we got a lot of black men that cut hair. Like, why can't we have black companies that provide, when you go into the military, the Marine Corps, Air Force, that provide the haircuts? That's right. That's money that you can count on, because the government's gonna always be the government. It's the richest government, and we're talking trillions of dollars.
At last year's economics convention, perhaps the most interesting and depressing research we heard about was from Duke economist Sandy Darity on colorism, bias based on the shade of one's skin.
Darker-skinned black men are confronted with higher levels of discrimination and lower wages in America's labor markets than lighter-skinned black men. And that in fact, and this is maybe the most provocative result, is that there's really not a statistically significant difference between labor market outcomes for lighter-skinned black males and white males.
At this year's convention, however, Darity was promoting policy, a government jobs program.
It strikes me that what we should do is establish a federal job guarantee and provide an assurance to every American citizen that they have employment that will be through the public sector.
But you're talking about 15 to 30 million Americans if you're counting the underemployed as well, or people who would want a full-time job. What are you going to pay them, like $20,000 a year?
Well, I'm more ambitious than that. I was thinking at least $40,000.
$40,000 a year plus benefits.
Yes.
All right, so that's $40,000. Then with benefits, $50,000 a year, 25 million people, let's say. That's, I think, little over $1 trillion. But how in the world can we possibly afford this?
I want a job guarantee for every citizen, because we're still left with the uncertainty of what kind of decisions private companies are going to choose to make.
Unless you are watching this video from Syria, it's fair to say that no matter how bad the situation in your country, Venezuela is doing worse. So the big question is, how did they end up there? How did the government destroy the economy in such a short amount of time? Today, we're gonna tell you that story.
The Bolivarian Revolution.
The first character in our story is Hugo Chavez, the father of modern-day Venezuela, or should we say the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. He became president after a landslide victory in 1999. His campaign was based on the promise of equality and poverty reduction, a policy that he called 21st century socialism. One of his first policies was called the System for the Democratization of Jobs. This was meant to be implemented in the PDVSA, the state company that extracts Venezuela's oil. In fact, this job democratization was a way to employ all of the unemployed Venezuelans. The same thing happened in the government. During the Chavez administration, public spending tripled. This meant more government workers and more social programs than ever before. However, none of this was a problem as long as the oil exports kept paying the bills. As long as the oil exports kept paying the bills. In fact, Chavez cut poverty in half. Despite being an oil-rich country, before Chavez, 60% of the population lived in poverty. 10 years after Chavez, only 30% did. But just hold on a minute, because this is where things turn sour. In 2014, oil prices fell and Venezuela was the first country to feel the effects of this fall.
The current situation in Venezuela is about as bad as it gets for a country that is not at war. Water is only arriving in the capital, Caracas, once a week. And when it does come, it's brown and makes people sick. The government is shutting off electricity for hours every day. This energy crisis is coupled with an economy in shambles. Inflation is about 700%, that's the highest rate in the world. All this is due to the poor decision-making of an extremist government that's been led by Hugo Chavez and his successor, Nicolás Maduro. They've been gradually killing business with a tsunami of regulations, price controls, and government takeovers, which has eliminated the private production of many goods and services. So people have bags full of cash, but nothing to buy. Grocery store shelves are bare, and hunger is spreading rapidly. The most tragic part of this story is that Venezuela is sitting on the world's largest reserves of black gold. So with all that oil, it should be on the opposite end of the spectrum. It should be one of the healthier economies in the world.
Black folk have been misled off the main highway down the dirt road and having a lot of belief in socialism. If it's social in nature, that's power. That's not power. Social, in a competitive economic structure, there is no moral conscience, and that leads them towards providing justice. It's never going to exist. The powerful is not going to be respecting morality nor justice. They're not going to do it.
Politicians and government don't want to work for us. What do we do?
Well, what do you mean they gotta work for us? What the thing is? See, the thing is, like
DC said
no, you can't go there. But here's the thing. Here's the thing, Carl. You can't go there first. We are actively, like, if we had been actively the past 10, 15 years as a voting bloc out there pushing politicians, and them politicians weren't moving, and we have been out there with people trying to get Citizens United overturned, and we couldn't do any of it. If you wanted to come back to me then and be like, Yvette, this ain't working, then I will hear you. But you can't tell me that when we haven't done any of the stuff that I talk about. We haven't done any of it. Not recently.
She wants the carrot. She wants the carrot. She's like, Mom, give me the carrot. Give me the carrot, Mom. I want the carrot. I want the carrot. Oh no, I need to get camera pictures. I want the carrot.
keep getting from everybody is, well, Yvette, are you a socialist? Are you a capitalist? Because you seem to have something against capitalism. You seem to have something against capital. You seem to be, anti-capitalist. And here's what I've kind of touched on. I've kind of touched on this on the show. But from my perspective, there is not one ideology. There is not one political system. There is not one anything that anyone should be married to if they're African American. We should do what works for us, and that's it. The second point I'll make is this. I don't know, and this is going to hit people kind of hard. And I've kind of alluded to it before. But I don't know if African Americans, morally, not intellectually or anything, morally, in terms of our values, I don't know if African Americans have what it takes to be super capitalist. I don't understand how you say to me, well, Yvette, we can be capitalists just like them. No, a lot of us are good and decent people. I think you have to try to figure out who you are.
The next 3 hours is your chance to participate in a discussion with one of today's leading radical journalists. Join us as In Depth welcomes Alexander Coburn, columnist for The Nation magazine and co-editor of the political newsletter Counterpunch.
Alexander Coburn, what does it mean to you to be a radical?
Radical really means that you don't necessarily regard, in fact, you absolutely don't regard the Democratic Party as about as far left as you can go on the American political spectrum. It's seriously to the left.
Where can people read you today?
They can read me every week on our Counterpunch website, www.counterpunch.org.
And Counterpunch is also in a printed form?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, in Counterpunch, twice a month we do a newsletter, Counterpunch, and 22 issues a year. And I quite often have articles in that.
Welcome to Counterpunch Radio. My name is Eric Draitzer, and I want to thank you so much for tuning in to episode 4. And Counterpunch is, again, if you're not so familiar with it, or if you're just coming to it, Counterpunch is really one of the last bastions of, alternative analysis, alternative perspectives that really come from the left, but that aren't beholden to what I would call the controlled left. And with all of that being said, I'm very pleased to be able to have yet another contributor to Counterpunch magazine with me today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Yvette Carnell onto Counterpunch Radio. Yvette is the founder of BreakingBrown.com. She's also the editor of YourBlackWorld.net. She has an amazing article in the current issue of Counterpunch magazine. So Yvette Carnell, thanks so much for coming on Counterpunch Radio.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric. I appreciate it.
Welcome to Tone Talk. So how are you doing today? This is Antonio Moore coming to you from Tone Talks. I have the wonderful Professor Richard Rothstein, author of Color of Law. Everybody has read that book and been inspired by your works, and I look forward to having a great discussion today. about what made you do the work and how we can delve into possibly using this to visualize what race has become in America versus what we have forgot it came from. You know what I'm saying? How's everybody doing today? This is Antonio Moore coming to you from Tone Talks. I have a special guest today, none other than Thomas Shapiro, author of Black Wealth, White Wealth, author of Toxic Inequality, one of the leading economists in this area of racial wealth.
You got little Havanas, little Hialeahs, you got little Italy, you got Greek towns, Pole town, Hockey town, any kind of, but you never find a black town because we are integrated. And integration means you scattered and lost your power and your resources. And you cannot run a business with scattered resources. It can't be done. So you build your own communities, and a community is where you store your values, your culture, your history, your tax base, your jobs, and your employment opportunities. You store them in your own communities. That's why 98% of all these other groups, they have their own communities, spend their money with their own people. We got it backwards. We go to other people's community, we go to other people's jobs to help them, and only 2% of the blacks in America work in their own community, in their own neighborhoods for their own people and got jobs. And so you got to build these communities, then you start practicing group economics and group politics. You pull out all the parties, build your own black independent parties, move away from the Republican Party, pull out the Democratic Party, because neither one of them have your interests at heart, and create your own parties. But don't run any candidates. So we will vote for any candidate in the National Black Independent Party who will promise the most and deliver resources to black folk to correct this structural inequity we're into. And I go through politics, show you how to play the politics. Keep your money with your own people, hire your own people, practice group economics from the bottom to the top.
I'm Carla Walker Miller, President and CEO of Walker Miller Energy Services. We are an energy solutions company. We're based in Detroit. We've been here since 2000. We take pride in helping customers evaluate their buildings and find solutions that will lower their operational cost and increase safety and comfort. Our tagline is empowering people, enriching lives. And we do that with every single customer that we deal with. We were selected to provide LED lighting for the city of Detroit. With the LED technology, there's less maintenance involved. It uses 85 to 90% less energy, and it lasts about 10 times longer than the old lighting. And it's really going to make a difference for the city. My business is to perform energy audits. We actually learn to develop audits on our own businesses. Because we're a service company, labor is our most expensive component, and we pay our team members way before we're actually performing on an audit. So we run into cash flow issues. It's made a huge difference. As a small business owner in Detroit, the thing I enjoy most is providing employment. We create jobs. We have 30 full-time employees with benefits, and within the next few years we'll be at about 60, and they're well-paying, green jobs, and that's a big deal here. My company is going to skyrocket.
Black Patriarch